Verse 750. The mind, primarily pure, is the Tathagata Garbha, which is good, but is attached to by sentient beings. It is free from limitation and non-limitation. Well, there's quite a lot here. Again, though, we have this inconsistency with mind. Here, mind is spelled with a capital M. And when mind is spelled with a capital M, I don't think we should have the definite article in front of it. So either it should be the mind, mind with a small m, or it should be mind, mind with a capital M. And I think from the context here, it's mind with a capital M. So it really should be mind, primarily pure, is the Tathagata Garbha. And Tathagata is the one who dwells in suchness. This is the successful enlightenment practitioner who most of the time is dwelling in realization of the nature of their essential being, of their essential awareness. And it's also what gives rise to everything. This might sound like we're talking about God or something, but let's not go there. It's unnecessary. Just appreciate the fact, I say the fact, that without awareness there would be nothing. You might argue with this and say, well, without awareness there would be no knowledge of anything. But then you'd be assuming that something is going on that awareness is not aware of. But how can you say that? How can you say that? That's a hypothesis. That's an idea that you're establishing as true over the obvious experience. You're creating an objective reality where there is none. So this takes a bit of getting used to. Reality is actually subjective, 100% subjective. We can create objective models for the sake of communicating, but let's not confuse those objective models with reality. If we assume that the world is objective, then at what point does our subjective experience of it arise? There's a discontinuity. There is no point at which the objective can become subjective, and yet this is the story of the senses. This is the story that we're taught to believe about the senses, that we're perceiving an objective world that somehow finds its representation inside our brains, and that representation is purely subjective. At what point does the objective become subjective? It cannot be. Objectivity and subjectivity are discontinuous. There's no continuity between them. The objective is a hypothetical construct. But don't take my word for it. Look into it yourself. So the mind, primarily pure, is the Tathagata Garbha. And this is the important point here. Mind is pure. It doesn't need to be purified. And we're told that it's attached to by sentient beings. Now the translator has put in brackets, is attached to as an ego soul by sentient beings. I didn't read that out, but maybe I should have done. Because this mind is the heart of our being. This mind is our own essential awareness. Although it's not my awareness, it's the awareness in which notions of me and the world arise. This is the womb of the Tathagata. This is what the womb of the Tathagata gives birth to. Notions of me and the world. But our deepest sense of being is this mind itself. And we know it is not this world of change and suffering. We know it's not this. And so we identify it with something permanent in ourselves. What's described here as the ego soul. And this is where things get confusing, because then we start building ideas about it. We start confusing it with the personality. We start confusing it with our ideas and beliefs. We start confusing it with our moods and sensibilities. We get attached to ideas, and this limits it. This limits it. This is what traps consciousness. In our spiritual path, it is not us that is becoming liberated, it's consciousness, it's mind itself. The last phrase tells us that mind is free from limitation and non-limitation. It is free from limitation. Mind itself is there or here, awaiting discovery. It itself is not subject to any limitation. And yet, when there is identification with the ego personality, with our moods, with our sensibilities, with our ideas and beliefs, when there's identification with all that, then realization of mind is lost. We can come back to this mind because it's our very own awareness. As enlightenment practitioners, this is what we do. We come back to the awareness which is hearing these words. And in this awareness, there is stillness. Stillness from the mind. Stillness from our sensibilities. Release from all our moods. There is love here. But this is curious as well. It also says that mind is free from non-limitation. But surely it is free from non-limitation. We can see how it's free from limitation. But how can it be free from non-limitation? Well, non-limitation is the act of not limiting it. But it can't be limited or not limited. It doesn't take its cue from the world and the nature of the world. It's completely independent. I've been reading a sutra called the Samadhi of direct encounter with the Buddhas of the present time. And there's a wonderful epithet of the Buddhas used in this sutra. The Buddhas are described as the self-existent ones. The self-existent ones. In other words, they don't take their cue for how they feel from the world. They are abiding in suchness. They're abiding in mind itself. They're generating love and bliss, independent of the world. It's going out into the world, but it's not coming from the world. So you could take a moment to consider your own feelings, your own moods, your own sensibilities, and to what extent they're dependent on what you understand is going on in the world. Because most of the time we're caught up in this dynamic between my sensibilities here and what I perceive to be going on in the world out there, and that generates a particular mood tone in myself which characterizes how I feel about life and the world, life, the universe and everything. But let's say we just dropped that and decided to be brilliantly happy, decided to be infinitely loving. We have this choice. What a wonderful option. We can decide to be infinitely loving, infinitely happy. We can stoke the bliss. This is what it means to be free of non-limitation. This is what it means to be identifying with mind itself. This is what it means to be self-existent. So we come back to mind itself, come back to awareness, the awareness which is hearing this, and realize when you're here, realizing your essential being, that infinite capacity for happiness can be unlocked.